On today's episode of Big Time, the podcast, season 5, we're diving into the world of skiing. Whole new realm here on Big Time, the podcast, with one of the best to do it. Today we got Fort Kent's Nick Michaud on Big Time, the podcast. Let's go.
I'm on my way, I'm making it. I've got to make it show, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another round of this podcast we call Big Time, the podcast. Keeping it going here on season 5. We're jumping into a whole new world. We haven't gone down this path before. We're going into the world of skiing with one of the best to do it, Fort Kent native, on the line tonight. We've got our boy. Actually, he's on the road. He's not even at home right now. We got Nick Michaud. Nick, how you doing, man? How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So talking to him a little bit before we got online here, out in Montana. So, I mean, just from that right there, it sounds like you've had quite the journey from Fort Kent to Montana. Just real quickly, you want to let everyone know what you're doing in Montana right now before we go back and hear how it all unfolded.
Yeah. So I'm a development team coach for the U.S. Paralympic Nordic Ski Program. And we are partnered with a local club called Crosscut, which might, in relation to what we know from Fort Kent, would be similar to Maine Winter Sports Center. So we run programming for little kiddos through, we have some athletes in their 60s. And we run local programming for them. We have an elite team of like professional athletes that are doing it full time. And then, so I'm helping them run programming, and we're partnered with the U.S. Paralympic Nordic Ski Team that I work for and travel around the world with and have athletes all around the country. And so it's my first full-time coaching gig, and I'm seeing a little bit of everything. Yeah.
I'm just curious too, because when you think Montana, skiing is something, the first thing that comes to mind. What's how would you compare it to the slopes here in Maine? What's Montana like?
Yeah, there are a lot of mountains here, and they're huge. I'd say the weather is milder. It's not humid like it is in Maine. It's not as cold or as hot because it's drier. So people aren't as good at driving out here as they are in Fort Kent. I feel like only in northern Maine can people drive around and dodge neons with bald tires and not be sliding everywhere all the time.
That's true. That's a very good point.
I've had to help people get out of parking lots with 4-wheel drive trucks. Like, you are not from northern Maine.
No, not at all. So in Montana right now, but as I mentioned at the very top, Fort Kent native here. So we're going to go back and kind of trace your story and kind of see what led you to where you are now. So Fort Kent native, born and raised, come from an athletic family, right? I know your dad. I remember seeing your dad play basketball on Sundays at the high school, and my dad used to go play as well. Yeah, and I guess in aunts and uncles as well. You got a pretty athletic family, right?
Yeah, I feel like I grew up outside, and I'm very fortunate for that. And I was lucky too. My mom was very much like, she read to me as a kid, and she made sure that we made time to sit down and read and do our homework and do it well. And she helped engage with school, but also my dad and my older brother, Gib, and I would just spend hours outside, and we'd make sure we got our firewood done, but then we'd play basketball or pass baseball for under the moon for hours. And that was a cool way to grow up. Yeah, I've probably played more basketball than done anything else in my life. I've probably taken millions and millions of shots just because we had a hoop in our driveway, and my brother would never say no to playing.
And you're a Pearly Brook kid, right?
South Pearly Brook.
Pearly Brook. All right. Yeah. So where do you stand?
Good.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, we just had a bunch of good athletes on that road.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, people say, "Oh, North Pearly Brook, we produce better athletes than South Pearly Brook," and this is probably not even a real conversation. I'm probably just making this up. But where do you stand on that argument? Are you I'm guessing you stand by your Pearly Brook. You stand by South Pearly Brook in that argument.
Oh yeah, we had Tom Karen, all the Karens, and oh man, Patrick Karen.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. There was a really good basketball player. Yeah, but South Phillybrook for sure. You had the Michos too, so. I'm not sure who lived on North Phillybrook.
It doesn't matter.
Oh.
It doesn't matter, right? It's all about South Pearly Brook anyway.
Corey Bazin, right?
Yeah, Corey Bazin was North Pearly Brook. Carson Hartman, North Pearly Brook. So
Yeah.
they had some athletes as well, but I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand with you. I'm gonna go with South Pearly Brook. Produces better athletes, and you guys
Thank
have
you.
you guys have better work ethic. You know, you guys got the potato fields way out there. You got Karen paving out there, right? Kutch Construction. That's all South Pearly Brook.
Yeah.
All right,
Our road was longer, so we had. Yeah.
great little neighborhood though. But you mentioned a lot of kids in that neighborhood too, and just always outside. Were you mostly just playing stuff in the backyard, or at a young age were you into like exploring in the woods? I'm curious where the skiing comes into play. Like, were you really put on skis at a young age, or was it more just backyard sports growing up?
It was a lot of backyard sports, and yeah, Gib and I were creative. Like sometimes we made up a lot of games, and we would spend hours playing them. Like, oh, let's play soccer golf. We had a pretty interesting yard, and we had 4 acres, and there was a pond and a couple trees, and it wrapped around the house, and there were a lot of hills, and so we were always coming up with ridiculous games. But yeah, we played a ton of basketball. Our favorite game was, we called it 21, but it wasn't like the one-on-one version. You'd get like a layup and a long shot, and you had to get on the board in order to score points, and then somebody had to try to get to 21, and then whatever. It's not important, but it would take it'd be like a 20-plus minute game, and we would play series of 7. And I remember one night we played a series of 7. So we played for like 6 hours straight.
Just
and
nonstop.
Yeah, we had a backstop that we would kick soccer balls at or play baseball. And yeah, we would do stuff like try to pass baseball an acre across the yard under the moonlight, and we would just yell throwing, and then you just couldn't see the ball until it was like a foot in front of you. And yeah, so that's where it all started. And my dad was really big into ball sports. So yeah, he, like you said, he played basketball a couple times a week. He played volleyball, softball. He was in a bunch of leagues. And he was pretty like a smart player. Like his thing was always hitting opposite field, or being able to shoot with both hands, or like making tough bounce passes. And like he was very creative. So I kind of grew up with that, like playing lots of sports, but also thinking like playfully and creatively with that, which when I started skiing was a severe advantage, because most people didn't grow up playing ball sports.
Right.
And what happened was my dad had, I don't know, I think he had knee surgery. And so he was trying to find sports to play that he could, like, that were easier on his knee. So he started golfing and Nordic skiing. And I did not like it until we went cross skiing. So like in the spring, like you said, we grew up around potato fields, and they basically are all connected. You could almost ski on the crust in the spring. It would get warm during the day, and then at night it would freeze, and then the snow would be as hard as a rock in the morning. And so you could almost ski all the way to Presque Isle, because there's so many fields.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? And so that was probably the first time that I had fun doing something, like doing a sport other than ball sports.
Right.
Like I was never interested in just going running. I preferred a ball and a goal. But what happened was he would take me and my older brother, and we would go skiing, and I wouldn't be able to keep up, and I would get up to them, and they'd be waiting, and they'd be like, "You good?" And before I even had time to really say much of anything, they would take off again. And that's kind of the narrative of like me growing up playing sports. I was always like playing with Gib and his friends, or my dad and their friends, and they were all much older than me. And I wanted to play with them and keep up, so I just found ways to. Nice. And it ended up making me really competitive, but also paying off. You know, you play with older people, you're gonna have to step up. And exactly. So, yeah.
So I'm guessing growing up, you did all the rec stuff in town. So summer rec soccer, rec basketball, just always doing something year round growing up, I'm guessing.
Yes, as many sports as I could. Yeah, and I always felt like maybe that's just what you want to feel, but I always felt like we were on the underdog team, like the Rowdies for Citizens Bank. And yeah, it was cool. My dad was my coach for all those sports, and his big thing was like passing and fundamentals and letting your playing do the talking. And I thought that was cool because those are all things that have carried over when I was skiing professionally, and also just in life. Like, don't talk shit, just do your work and do it well. Those are good things to learn from sports.
So I'm guessing when you were growing up, you were probably young, or the whole biathlon craze or the biathlon movement and the whole Maine Winter Sports Center, that was all probably just coming to light and forming up when you were young, I'm guessing, right? That was probably, you were real young, I'm guessing, when that was coming along.
Yeah, I think it was like 2001. It was like 1999 or 2001 where it started. They were like building those lodges and like really getting everything going. So by the time I was in middle school, they had really good programming being run, and I was like starting to go to training camps with coaches that were Olympians and like had all these cool experiences. And so my first trip was in 8th grade, and I went to this like race in southern Maine, and I went with this guy who was an Olympian. He had tattoos. He had this super cool wife. He was just like super interesting, and he made skiing seem so cool. And I was like, hell yeah, like I could see how I could do this. And yeah, so when I got to high school, all of a sudden I had the chance to like train full time, and with like a lot of coaching and a lot of cool travel opportunities. And so I started getting more and more into it and committing more and more full time. And eventually I played soccer my freshman year, and I played baseball every spring because it wasn't an important time for ski training. But other than that, it was like pretty much doing everything I could to train full time to race fast in the winter. And I was fortunate enough to like take trips to Europe or around the country that was fully funded by this Libra Foundation. So it was a really cool movement that was going on.
So what
and they were bringing in like older athletes too, so I could train with like, I got to be like around professional athletes and stuff.
Yeah,
in
so
high school.
That's what I'm curious about. So like when you first started, if I remember correctly, didn't they do like a lot of like local type events or like camps for you could just go and I don't even know what you guys did, but they really reached out to the community early on, right? And there's a lot of like youth stuff, like introduction to the sport or introduction to skiing itself, right, early on.
Yeah, and like eventually they were like running, like for high schoolers, like they were running camps for like all Mainers, and yeah, they were really like building up a culture. And there was just exposure to the like top end with athletes they were bringing in, and there was exposure with travel. And I like, had that been the case with soccer or basketball, like I probably would have taken that track, but we just had limited opportunities with those sports.
Right.
And so I just like, I wanted to train full time, and I wanted to like see how good I could get. And I felt like I had the chance to, so I did that. Um,
And you had mentioned earlier on when you were younger and, just trying to keep up with your dad and your older brother, and that just pushed you where it was either you had to keep up or fall behind. And just having that experience and that opportunity to train with people from all over the country that would come here to train, that also just helped push you and just basically you were exposed to a level of competition or skill that, like you said, we didn't get in other sports around here. We didn't have soccer players from around the country here that you could kind of work out with and put yourself up against. Same thing with basketball, but
yeah,
skiing, you had that.
yeah, yeah. So that was a huge opportunity, and also because of I think it was the Libra Foundation technically that was funding everything. Like, I could afford to go on race trips across the country with all these kids from like private schools and around New England or the West and whatnot. And so, yeah, I just had a lot more exposure. So it was super, super lucky for that. And just as a kid growing up in Northern Maine, I felt lucky that I got to see more things. And it was through sport.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have gone to I definitely wouldn't have gone to all those places otherwise. So that's cool.
So this is where the conversation is going to shift towards a little bit of knowledge here, because I have
Sure.
to admit, from Fort Kent, I skied maybe one time, one winter my entire life. Did
Yeah.
not like the snow. Did not like being outdoors. Never
Yeah.
went to the ski tow. The only time I ever utilized the outdoor center was to go run the trails in the summertime. Let's break down
Yep.
skiing for the people that may not know all about skiing. So you mentioned Nordic skiing. There's also alpine skiing. Let's break it down. So what does Nordic encompass? What is Nordic skiing?
Yeah. So I think technically Nordic skiing is like under the umbrella of Nordic skiing. There's cross country skiing, there's biathlon, and then I think also is called Nordic combined, which is uh, basically they'll do ski jumping and cross country skiing. So in Fort Kent, for example, was biathlon programming and biathlon events, and also cross country skiing events and programming. Within cross country skiing, there's classic skiing and skate skiing. The skis in classic skiing are like in a track and parallel heading down the trail, and with skate skiing, they're like in a V, like you're ice skating. And then biathlon, you'd ski a loop, like for a race, you ski a loop, skate ski it, and then you come in and you shoot 5 targets. And depending on the biathlon event, there are different number of loops and different number of times you shoot, but those are like the general principles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what did you gravitate towards? Did you try a little bit of everything growing up and kind of fell into one thing or enjoyed one thing more than the other, or were you just better at one thing and just stuck to it? How did you kind of fall into what you wound up doing, and what did you wind up doing?
Yeah. So within biathlon, there are different length events. If you're a biathlete, if you're the best in the world, you do every event, and you're probably going to win every one of them if you're the best. In Nordic or in cross country skiing, there's I would say a larger spread of like disciplines. So there's like, a 50-kilometer race, and then there's sprint racing and everything in between. And so because I had the opportunity, I did a lot of biathlon, and I was fairly good at it. Like, I went to World Juniors, but I kept gravitating toward cross country skiing, and most specifically sprinting. And I went to college, and they didn't have sprinting on the circuit. But every time I hopped in one, I would just perform way better than longer races. And so eventually after college, that's what I focused on. Like, I was full time only thinking about sprinting and training for it. And at the highest level, there are guys that are very good at both. It's more common to see somebody better at distance racing or sprinting. And for whatever reason, I just was notably much worse at distance racing. And so, but I was like, whatever, I'm going to be the master of my thing, and I'm going to try to see how good I can become at it. And so it was cool. It was, a slightly less traditional path to basically try to make the Olympics. But yeah, it was fun.
All right. So, and then also, I just want to kind of get a comparison for maybe those such as myself that don't get on skis. What would you compare like a sprint to what kind of run equivalent would it be? Is it like or just like the intensity level? What would you kind of compare it to if you were going to compare a sprint on skis compared to like something else? Like how would you compare it?
Yeah, I guess maybe like in track would be like an 800.
Okay.
It's way more variable, but the times usually end up being like between 2 and 4 minutes. But because if there's like a downhill or something, I would say the effort is probably comparable to an 800 meter.
Okay.
In track. The one thing that's tough is like you run a qualifier in the morning, so you go out and you ski the course by yourself, and then they rank the top 30 and they place you into heats. So then you have to make it through quarterfinal, semifinal, and final. So if you make it to the final that day, you do it 4 times. So it can be a lot physically, but also mentally to like prep yourself for that multiple times in one day. Which is cool. I thought it was, those elements are interesting, I'd say.
Absolutely. So we know what you kind of fell into in terms of what you wound up doing and competing at the highest level at. I want to go back a little bit and see how you got from 8th grade to, you mentioned trying out for the Olympic team. I want to kind of trace this journey here. So early on, like in 8th grade, how did it work? Did you compete for the Maine Winter Sports Center, or was it like a regional thing? Because it wasn't like a school thing, correct?
Yeah, I did. So now we're in high school, and like we did have a ski team for the high school, and so I did compete on that also. But the focus was, like national and international competitions, and so I was a part of the Maine Winter Sports Center, and we would train year round for those. And I thought it was important to be on the high school team. I unfortunately, like, it usually didn't align with like optimal training and prep for those races. And so, I was like lucky enough that the coaches and the team they were happy with me, doing that and still being a part of their team, and if that meant being at less events or whatnot. But so I would travel with Maine Winter Sports Center, and the idea was that like there are national events in the spring that you can qualify for, that you have to qualify for regionally. So you have to make the New England junior national team in order to race at nationals. And basically what was going on is New England was so strong that if you made the New England junior national team, you probably would get a top 10 at junior nationals, which is really cool to be part of such a strong, like at home, it was already really strong nationally. And then from there, there were also opportunities to try and qualify for international trips. So my junior year of high school, after a couple of years of training, I qualified for a couple of international trips to race for the U.S. instead of racing for New England. So that's when things started really like coming together, was towards the end of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then curious, so throughout this time, so you mentioned you're still competing for Kent Community High School. when the time was there, but you were training with the Maine Winter Sports Center. How does that work? Like, is it you get sponsored? Is it kind of like sponsorships, or are you paying your way to be part of that club, or how did that work?
Man, I'm trying to remember. It didn't really cost me anything, and that was probably the most unique thing about my experience skiing versus like later on when I'm racing professionally against these people. Like, I would say most skiers come from some money, and you just have to, like, to be able to commit your life to training full time and have had the opportunities to travel around and have good equipment and good coaching and high level experiences. Like, it's expensive. And because of this foundation, like, I think I had to keep meeting performance standards to like go on extra trips or get extra coaching or have stuff paid for. So I think they were running like general level programming that was pretty cheap. And if you were performing well, you had opportunity, like more travel opportunities and training opportunities. So they were trying to make it at least somewhat performance based so that, you know, you're not just a schmuck not training,
Right.
Taking advantage of these opportunities, which is like, it's not that common. Like, I don't know why you would want to. It takes like it's pretty hard to just go hammer by yourself in the woods. You have to really want to do it. So
you mentioned juniors. So what's the age range for juniors? Is it like up to age 18 and then it goes to senior, or just national team, or how does the age break down here?
Yeah. Again, you're testing me. I think up to age 18 or 19, and then there's like basically it's all in categories. So there's like U16s, U18s, U20s, U23s, and then you're a senior. Okay. So technically, once you're 23, then you're a senior athlete.
Okay.
And so within those age groups, you can qualify for international teams. So you can represent the U.S. as a U16 or a U18. And the goal is that, like, there's a pipeline, and by the time you're 23, you should be performing like you're a full senior.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned by the time you kind of wrapped up high school, things were starting to fall into place for you. But you also mentioned skiing in college as well. So where did you wind up going to college after you graduated from Fort Kent?
Yeah, so I went to Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. And basically all of these, New England has a ton of, like I mentioned, like junior skiing is really strong in New England. And there are a bunch of schools that have Division I ski programs. And so I almost felt like I could have gone to any of these schools that had Division I programs, and I was mostly looking at like the culture of the place and the courses and the people I was going to spend my time with, because I was going to get, either way, I was going to be in a Division I program. And so I chose Bates because it was in Maine. I thought Lewiston was a really cool place. The culture of the school was very like warm and friendly and inviting, and people were engaged with each other. And I just have an aversion to elitism, like being from northern Maine. And so when I visited a lot of these other fancy schools, I felt like people knew they were good and thought they were fancy, and I didn't like that. And for the most part, the people I engaged with when I visited Bates were like, they were real, they were down to earth. And so I chose to go there. And they had produced a lot of good skiers, so that was another draw for me.
Yeah, so where do you guys ski in Lewiston? I'm curious here. I'm guessing there's got to be like something similar to Maine Winter Sports down there in that area, or how did that work?
Yeah, it's called Pineland Farms. It's in New Gloucester, okay. So it's like 20 minutes away from Lewiston. and there's like a dairy farm. They have all these running and ski trails. Yeah, it's a super cool place. People have weddings there. Uh, yeah, there are business offices in the place, so it's more so like a big campus,
Okay.
and then it's like seated right next to the woods, and there's all kinds of awesome trails there.
So once you hit college, how did you balance competing for Bates, still competing on the national level? How were you able and go to school at the same time? That's the thing we haven't really touched on. You know, I'm guessing there's a lot of training that goes into it. It's a year-round thing, but
Yep.
you graduated high school, you went to college. How were you balancing all those things at the same time when in college?
Yeah, it was hard. Luckily, I had a bunch of teammates that were also trying to do that. So there was a culture around it. And it paid off in ways that were like, I'd say probably the hardest part about college if you're trying to be a high-end athlete is just like socially. And so like we would usually, like Sunday morning, for example, we would do a very long workout, and we'd come back after like a 3-hour run or something to the dining hall, and people were then just waking up. And I think by myself that would have been really frustrating. I would have done it, but it wouldn't have been as fun. But like with a team of, 8 to 15 people, there was a culture around it, and everyone was doing it, and it was fun, and so it worked. I think that's a big thing, like that I missed about team sports theoretically with skiing, but I've been a part of a lot of programs that were like recognize that the culture is important, and that's, you've been on basketball teams and soccer teams and stuff where like the culture of a group really like ends up being super important. And so it worked because there were a lot of us doing it. And also because professors liked the program and liked us and were fine with us traveling. That's another tough piece, is just like missing classes. But all of my teammates and I found that we were more organized and did better in our courses during season than any other time of the year, which I thought was really interesting because we usually had less time. We just had to be more organized and sharper. And when we had a lot of time, it was easy to then get distracted by other things.
Yeah. So you mentioned culture, and you've mentioned culture a couple times, and that leads me to my next question, because with as much time as you've put into it, I mean, going all the way back to middle school, just year-round training and stuff like that, at any point, like around these college years, because talking to some other people on the podcast, for a lot of them around this time, they just became burnt out, just tired of the sport, tired of balancing things, tired of it cutting into their personal lives. At any point, did this become a problem or an issue with you? Or, like I said, you kept mentioning the good culture. Did that kind of prevent fatigue from setting in for you, or what kept you going during all this time?
Yeah, culture, the people, for sure. And like I said, the college racing was just distance racing. And I really was like, I'd kind of made my way nationally with sprinting, but it hadn't happened with distance racing. And so it was like, I was not I wasn't not like performing, like I wasn't winning races. I was pretty middle of the pack. And so my junior year, I was almost like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Cause like you just pour so much time into it, and I don't like not being good at things. And so, but I kept having a couple sprint races, and it would be like, oh yeah, that's there. But I wanted to be a part of the team and the program no matter what. So it kept me going during those times where I was frustrated. So yeah, good question.
At this time too, I'm curious, because for most people, they do high school sports, they do college sports, and then they're done. But obviously you had a future and something to pursue after college. While in college, did you set yourself a goal like, all right, I'm going to keep doing this after school, I want to keep pursuing this, and this is my goal, and if I can do this, then I'll be happy? Or was it a different thought process as to what you were going to do after college?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do after college. And one of the coaches that I worked with at Maine Sports Center called me a few months before graduation. Probably a few months, end of the winter. And was like, hey, I think you're really talented at sprinting, and I think it would be a really cool life experience to pursue trying to qualify for the next games for sprinting. And I think you're talented enough, and I would love to work with you, and I'll fully fund it. And so like, what do you think? Think about it. And I just felt like I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And it's not a good way to base a life decision, but we were at the Rollodrome in Auburn that night, and I was like, man, skating is fun. And I was like, but basically I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready to be done with my athletic pursuit, just because school is ending. And I had this opportunity, so I should do it. Like, whatever I want to do career-wise after is not going to go away. And then like a month before graduation, they cut the funding for the elite team, and they laid this coach off. And then I really had to decide, because he had planted the idea, but then I had to really decide how badly do I want to do this, because then I have to figure out how to make it work. And that's how I ended up in Montana.
That would have been, what year was this?
This is 2015.
All right, so you were shooting for the 2016 games then, or 2018? 2018 games. Okay, so that's another piece of it. So if you want to get to that level, it's not something you start doing the year before. I mean, this was 3 years prior, and that was the goal, was to try to make the 2018 Olympic team.
Yeah, and it was like 10 years prior. Yeah. But yeah, fully focusing on that for 3 years, and all I had to lose really was like some time and some money. But so I fully sent it. I didn't have a car, but I had a motorcycle, and one of my friends was moving to California. So 2 days after graduation, I put my motorcycle and ski bag and some other stuff in the back of his U-Haul, and we drove west. And I joined a pro team here in Bozeman.
So how does that work? I didn't realize there were, like I said, I'm not familiar with the skiing thing. So you said the
no worries.
protein. So how does that work? I'm guessing it's just sponsorship, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, so it depends on the program. They're probably like, right now, 6 or 7 pro teams, and they're all funded very differently. But for the most part, people rely on like personal sponsorships or corporate sponsorships or gear sponsorships, and then depending on what program you're in, the program will contribute some funding. So part of my draw to this program was that they had tiered funding. So you could, if you're at least at a certain level, then you could be a part of the team and pay your way. And then if you then perform at a higher level, you would be on tier 2, and 50% of expenses would be paid for. And if you then perform higher, you move up to tier 1 and everything is paid for.
Okay.
And I felt like it was a really cool concept, and I was into it because I needed to find a way to make it affordable, and I also wanted to have a structure for not overstaying my visit. Like, if I can't make it to tier 1, basically my thought was, if I can't make it to tier 1 by the games, then I'm not going to make the games, and I shouldn't continue to treat my life like I'm a professional athlete, and I should move on to something else. And it's like, not to be too cynical, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And otherwise, I'm going to do it recreationally. And so that's kind of how I saw it. And so I moved up the ranks and I moved up the tiers, and all of a sudden it's 2018 and the games are, or I guess 2017, because the winter season starts in November. And yeah, first race, I won. And I was like, holy shit, I think this is going to happen. And like, I was working up to that, and it shouldn't have been that much of a surprise, but it's still, when things align perfectly, it is still a little shocking in sports, right?
Yep.
So I was first in the first race and second in the second, and there were 4 qualifying races. And there was like a month between, there were 2, and then there was a month between, and there were 2 more. And so during that month, it was like, okay, like, I'm going to Korea, like, let's buy plane tickets, let's figure it out. And then I ended up missing the spot by 1. So I got bumped down in the next 2 races. And that didn't sit very well.
So basically, last person cut to not make the team.
Yeah.
That is tough to swallow.
It's tough to swallow. It was, I mean, it was such a cool experience and such a fortunate place to be. But it still stung a lot, you know? Like if you were trying to, I don't know, if you were trying to make the NBA and you almost did, you didn't, but you were that good. Yeah. It's still going to sting. But I would go back and do it again if I had 9 lives, I would do it every time, you know? So, yeah.
So that was 2018 was the game. So that was just last year. Curious, a skier.
2
years
winters ago.
2 winters ago. So for a skier, I'm curious, what's like the life cycle? At what age is it kind of like, all right, it's, you know, they got a lot of these younger guys coming up. It's time to kind of step away. Like, were you still young when you had to make the decision? Like, okay, like I tried, you know, I didn't make the team in 2018. Do I try to do it again? Or at that point, were you kind of at an age where it's like, that was my shot, that was my window, it's time to do something else?
I was young enough for sure that I could have tried for 1 or 2 more games. The problem is that, like, even though I was fully funded at this point, I still wasn't. I had to like bartend and try to find ways to make enough money to survive, and it had been pretty taxing. And I just wasn't ready to do that for 3 more years. So yeah.
So at the top, we mentioned what you're currently doing now, and you just got into coaching, but there's been a gap since the 2018 games and where we are today. So what have you been doing in that meantime? Were you trying to figure out what you wanted to do? Have you been kind of weighing the decision? Did you have other options available? What happened from the games to now to where you are now?
Yeah. So I actually because I performed so well, I had a lot more sponsorship opportunities. And I think after that season, I think that was the moment when I was most burnt out. You mentioned that earlier. And I think because the first couple of years I wasn't fully funded. And so it was tough financially, and I was working a lot of part-time jobs to make ends meet. And I had a college degree, and there were moments where that was really frustrating, but I wanted it so badly. And so after that was when I think I felt most emotionally drained. And I would say that's probably when people talk about feeling burnt out, that's what it is. Like, I've been working so hard and it didn't quite happen. But that spring, as I was trying to figure out what to do, I had more sponsorship opportunities and people were excited and I had all the support. And I was like, well, I'll come out of this. This is what I know and love and I do. And so I'll do it I'll keep doing it. And then I got injured a lot that year. The second week of the training year, which is the start of May for us, I rolled my ankle, which is not that big of a deal, but then I started getting tendonitis in my Achilles on the other side. And then I got tendonitis in my elbow. And then I dropped a knife in my foot and it got infected.
Ooh.
And then I dislocated my shoulder. And then it was November. So the season was starting. And I spent so much time training indoors and trying to still get my hours in and workouts in. But at that point, I was very burnt out. And so I made it to – my goal was to try to qualify for World Championships. And I didn't. And that ended mid-January. And then I was like, okay, now I'm done. Like I've probably been burnt out for a year. But I gave World Champs a try, and now I'm done. And I spent that rest of that winter alpine skiing and substitute teaching and visiting friends and just taking a break.
So did coaching ever come into your mind at all, or was this something that was just presented to you and you're like, you know what, that might be a good idea?
Yeah, I've always thought about it. I really like working with people, and in my life, like the coaches that I worked with had the most impact on me. And so I think I was thinking next steps, like I probably want to coach or teach because I get to work with a lot of people. And so at the end of the winter, the director of the U.S. Paralympic team, who used to be the president of Maine Sports Center and coached me when I was a freshman in high school, which is crazy, asked me if I wanted to go to Japan with them. And I was like, absolutely. So I got to go coach on a World Cup trip in Sapporo, Japan last March. And it was so cool. When you're an athlete, especially on the road, like you're always trying to like race and train and recover. And so if you're not racing and training, if you're being as good as you can be, then you're spending time with your feet up. And I like doing stuff and being productive. And it was the first ski trip I went on where I was like, I felt productive all day. And if I was tired at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. I could still go explore the city, or, I didn't have to worry about performing at the highest level in the morning. You do, but like physiologically I didn't. And so I had a blast. And so they offered me a job this spring and I was like, absolutely. So here we are.
So now you're into it, and I'm guessing you're kind of learning more about yourself as you go along, finding things you like, finding things you're good at. You set a goal for what you wanted to do as a skier. How about as a coach? Have you kind of looked that far ahead? Like, I like this. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to try to reach as a coach. Or are you just more so trying to figure out yourself as a coach and kind of feeling it out still, let's say?
Yeah, a little bit of both for sure. It's cool to be a part of a program that is also, as an athlete professionally, I was like focusing on winter games. So it was like nice to have a timeline, like, oh, in 3 years, I hope to make the team. So for this program, they think in Olympic cycles. And so the next games are in Beijing in 2022. Ooh. And we are doing everything we can to find ways to get the most medals. And as a coach, that's a really nice goal, to like play a role in the organization getting more medals. But I guess fundamentally, my goal is to be the kind of coach that sees people's potential and helps them tap into that. Yep. And I think the best way is focusing on process goals, so things that you can control. And I think in the sports world, it's probably more common in the ball sports world than endurance sports, but still, like I feel like sometimes people aren't treated as humans. like, oh, there's this exceptional person that can do this thing, and let's see what we can get out of them. And I think there's a better way to do that. And so that's my goal, is to work with athletes in a way that's like, you're a human who has real human needs and life experiences, and like that happens to be striving for excellence in a sport, and this is how that becomes a piece of that puzzle, not I'm an athlete and only an athlete.
Right.
And so, yeah, the thing that I've liked the most is, focusing on the process. So like, instead of, I want to score 40 points. It's like, okay, well, let's break that down. Like, what do you need to work on fundamentally, and what can we control and train so that you're prepared so that performance falls into place because you've been prepared for it. And that's what's really cool about skiing too, is that like we can, especially in this program where we have all these sports physiologists and psychologists and nutritionists, and like we can learn so much about little fine details and have it all come together for those results. And it's really cool.
Yep, I agree, absolutely.
But I'm new also, so still figuring some of that stuff out.
It's a process, just like as an athlete.
It's a process. Just like as an athlete, exactly.
We're going to get into some of our segments here before we get up out of here. We're going to do some of the fun ones before we get up out of here.
90 seconds. 90 seconds. Rapid fire. No dodging or ducking. It's time for Take Your Pick on Big Time, the podcast.
My first question for you, on a race day, how many calories did you have to consume?
Probably like 5,000.
5,000 calories. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. Favorite country you got to travel to?
Japan.
Coldest temperature you had to race in on a race day?
Oh, they didn't. They were strict about it. The legal limit is -4 Fahrenheit.
Even that.
I've definitely skied in like -20s in northern Maine, but we weren't allowed to hold races, or race unless it was at least -4 or warmer.
That's still too cold for me, but that's
yeah, right.
Yeah. Favorite place that you raced at? What's your favorite venue?
Silver Star, British Columbia.
All right. What is, or do you have like an arch nemesis, biggest rival, that one person that you just constantly measured yourself against, that just got under your skin? You just had to be better than them?
Of course, you don't ever want to admit it though, but I did. I had someone, and he ended up making the games. One of those 2 spots that I didn't get. So man. It really, yeah.
That's tough. Here's how I like to end a lot of these rapid fire questions. Where's the best place to get a puts in?
Rock's Family Diner.
There we go. That's the right answer. Right.
I used to work there.
Me too. That was my first job, so that place is near and dear to my heart. So, and they were a sponsor of the podcast once upon a time. So we love the people at Rock. So shout out to them.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Take one, keep one, steal one. On Big Time, the podcast.
Looking back at your athletic career, what is one thing that current day Nick would tell 10-year-old Nick, in terms of, it could be any type of advice? What's one thing that you would tell your 10-year-old self with everything you've been through?
That, and this flipped the year of the games when I started performing way better, was don't, how would I say it? Hope that your opponents perform at their best, because then you are a part of that. Because I think it's really hard to learn how to have healthy competition. And that was the coolest transition, was like, you know what? I hope that everybody shows up for the games year, and that I'm a part of that, because whoever goes will race better because I was a part of that. So that's what I would try to tell 10-year-old version of me. Yeah.
That's the best answer I think we've had right there. I like that.
Hell yeah.
What's one thing that 10-year-old Nick would tell current day Nick? Just one piece of advice that he would give him.
Especially as I was finishing up and getting a little burned out, like, go play. It's easy to just focus so much on training and times and details, and I got into it from sliding around on potato fields or playing basketball under the moon with my brother, and I think every high performance athlete needs to have more moments of play like that, because that's usually how it starts.
I like it. And then the last one is steal one. So what's one thing you would steal from maybe one of your teammates, one of your coaches, anybody in your life? It could be a skill, it could be a trait, anything at all. What's one thing you wish that you could take from somebody else and used it throughout your athletic career?
Be able to turn off. I think, like, I'm a very passionate person, so when I want something, I'm constantly figuring out how to make that work, reach this goal. What do I have to take? And I'm jotting down notes and having conversations with people. And there were times where I would have fared well with being able to just shut that down. And the moments when I did do well, I was able to shut that down.
Yeah. It's very important. I have that problem. I can't turn my mind off. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think of all the things I got to do, and I can't turn it off. I got to learn to turn things off.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I think that's one of the things that sports teach you. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on. You need to make this foul shot right now. And it's literally just bending, like, you've done it 1,000 times. You can shoot 99% in practice, but you got to do it right now. You got to shut everything else out. And that's just life. Like, if you care about anything, you're going to be thinking all the time. So
great answers all across the board right there. That might be the best segment we've had in terms of answers for that segment. So nailed that one. Gonna keep things moving here to another segment. Big bro Charlito. Charles comes through on every episode, and he always has this question that he's wondering. So, Charles, what is your question for Nick here?
From the land of Donair and Poutine, it's time to sort fact from fiction. Live on location, it's Charlito Wonders. On Big Time, the podcast.
Hey Nick Michaud, what up? It's Charlito out here in Halifax. I gotta admit, you're a little bit younger than me, so I haven't really followed your true journey through the whole Olympic progress here, but congratulations. You're probably one of the few Olympians to come out of Fort Kent. I'd like to know the whole list, because it's not a very large list at all. I'm just wondering, what does it take to become an Olympian? Is it hours of training? Is it being in the right place at the right time, catching somebody's eye like a scout or something? Because I've been working on this curling out here in Canada, and I think I got what it takes. So if you got any connections, hook a brother up, huh? All right, man, congratulations. I know the family's proud, town's proud. Good work, my man.
All right, so just missed the Olympic team, but still having been through it, though. I mean, you know what it takes. You were right there. So
yeah.
What does it take? What does it take for the all the little 5th and 6th and 7th graders or 5-year-olds up there in Fort Kent, Maine? What does it take to get to that highest level?
It takes it takes the courage to work. Trying not to swear here.
You can swear. We cuss all the time on here. It's okay.
Okay. It takes the courage to work a shit ton for a long time on something that you care about. And I think the core of that is like a lot of passion, because they say that like it takes 10,000 hours to get to the highest level of something that you're doing. That could be piano, or that could be ski racing. They also back that up physiologically with 10,000 hours of total physiological training over a career. And it has to be a passionate lifestyle in order to work that much on something and enjoy it enough to thrive and keep asking questions about how you can get better. Yeah, it was a project that started, in 8th grade, and it probably went better because I was playing sports and grew up in a culture where people work their asses off every day. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, was just like a lot of work. And I grew up around people that know how to work.
Yep.
And that part was familiar to me. Yeah.
There you go. That's all it takes, ladies and gentlemen. That's all it takes.
I hope everyone had a good time, because things are going to get serious for a moment. It's time to talk death on Big Time, the podcast.
Gonna segue here into our last segment before we get up out of here. So this is when we get serious on the podcast. This is when we talk about death. The segment's called When You Die, what jersey do you want to be buried in? So you've been part of a lot of amazing teams. So you have a lot of different options here. Which team or which jersey means the most to you, and which one would you take with you to the grave?
And this is a hard thing, like trying to move past a sports career, not move past it, but like okay, I had this career as a professional skier and I tried to make the games, and what do I do next? So I'm going to say, moving forward and getting excited about what I'm working on now, a jersey from the Paralympic team. Nice. Which is a little different than, we wear race bibs that are different each race. So we'll say a jersey or a bib from the 2022 games in Beijing.
I like it.
My new project. Yeah. So
I like it. Great answer right there. Great answer.
Thanks.
All right, so this has been a really fun episode. I learned a whole lot about skiing. I feel educated. I can actually go up to my hometown now and maybe actually talk about the things that are going on in my hometown. So this has been very beneficial to me, but it's not about me. It's about you. So before we get up out of here, this is your chance to kind of say anything you want. If you want to break some news, we're always trying to break news here on Big Time. If you want to clear the air or call somebody out, if you got something to say, anything at all, the floor is yours. This is your time to say whatever you want to say before we get up out of here.
First of all, my older brother and I never beat my dad at 2-on-1 basketball. Even when my brother was a senior in high school, we still couldn't beat him at 2-on-1. And so, Dad, rematch coming your way.
I like it.
And also, I mentioned this, but like, I'm so grateful that I come from Fort Kent, and I come from a place where people shake your hand and look you in the eye and know and care about your story and just work hard. Like, I can't say enough for the culture of just like working hard. And I think that is awesome. And I hope that it continues, and that whatever kids are up to up there, they know that they can do whatever they want because they know how to work. They know how to be kind to people, and I think that's really sweet.
I like it. Well spoken. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas Michaud on Big Time. I got to admit, this is probably one of the best spoken individuals we've had on the podcast. All kinds of great words of wisdom to the youth, to the people in general, and all kinds of love from my favorite town in the whole world, Fort Kent, Maine. So, Nick, thank you for coming on. I talked to you a little bit before we came online about this. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, but understandably so, you're a pretty busy guy right now. Yeah, thanks for having me, and good luck. Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to go check out all of our previous episodes on, you name it, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. We're all over the place. Go check out all those previous ones, and make sure to tune in next week for another big episode as always. With that, we'll see you next time.